Swiftly, Deputy Clare Daly.
And I think it's no accident that everybody kind of seized on the breezy opening statement that economic recovery is now firmly established, because, of course, that's not true for so many of our citizens against a backdrop of incredibly monstrous rents, precarious living situation for so many people, and casual and precarious work. And it's kind of ironic that years ago, when economic resources were far less than they are now, the basics, a roof over your head, access to healthcare when you were sick, the idea of a job that you progress in and end up with a pension at the end of it, actually were better delivered than we're delivering in the present society. And I think it's ironic that when you read the opening part of the statement in respect of housing, we hear that the supply response has been insufficient to keep a pace with demand, sort of washing your hands of it as if it was some act of God that had absolutely nothing got to do with government policy. And it's a little bit frightening to see that the solution to the housing problem is the publication of an action plan for housing, when, you know, in November 14 we had the Social Housing Strategy 2020, and we really need to see some work being done rather than just reports being issued. And while I welcome the parts of the report where dealing with the issue of FEMPI being addressed, it doesn't get to the heart of much of the problems in our public service, involving the really low rates of start-up pay for teachers, guards, nurses and so on, and even our own county councillors who were in before the ministers dealing with the stipends and expenses that they get aren't even keeping a pace with the economic demands on citizens at the moment. So recovery is not firmly established for many people, and I think when we judge a society, we have to judge it in terms of what we can deliver for our citizens. There used to be a lot of pride in the idea of looking after people from the cradle to the grave. And I want to look at the area of particularly older citizens, and the idea that you would be in a job where you could contribute to a pension and that you could retire on a decent standard of living, because this concept is under threat, even in instances in many of the hundreds of thousands of our citizens who are paying into pension funds all their working lives. And to have only at the 11th hour, we were actually discussing it last night under the social protection discussion, but this issue and the decisions made in it are firmly in your department's charge, in the case, for example, of the CRC, where last month, overnight, the pension was wound up and people were told they were being left with essentially nothing. How is that an economic recovery when, you know, the decision was based on 3 months' bond yields? 3 months bond yields against all of the best advice in terms of long-term strategy and investment. And your approval, Minister, was required for this move, but I don't think that that was sought. I'm pretty sure you didn't probably grant that. And of course we've got to factor in as well, if staff move to the SP-SPS, then there'll have to be some revisions in your forecasts for expenditure, because it is going to put a demand on the Exchequer which is not factored in to these figures, or indeed the summer economic statement. We need those contingencies worked in. There's no contingencies, for example, in relation to Brexit and how that's going to impact on our finances. And I thought the points made by Deputy Bruin were very pertinent. You've got to see issues in terms of the team that you're dealing with on the other side and unforeseen events, but this is actually potentially a foreseen event that we could factor in, but it's not been addressed in that regard. And I think when we look at how we manage public expenditure and I suppose the social wage, to me how we treat pensioners is a key part of that. And I'd like to know what consideration has been given in terms of the estimates, in terms of, say, your department, for example, taking on pensioner liabilities in relation to the CRC plan, or any other pension plans that decide, if they get away with it, to follow down a similar path. How can it be allowed that a company, or an organisation rather, which provides a crucial public service and is funded by public money, can basically unilaterally wind up a pension scheme and say that those people are going to be transferred to the SPSPS, again potentially being a drain on the exchequer, when that organisation has resources at its disposal, including 12 million of a capital development fund that could be easily used to plug the relatively small gap, rather than that amount ending up back on the public purse. Why does the CRC need new buildings? If there is a problem in the pension fund, surely there is other ways of addressing that matter. And I really think when we look at the summer economic statement, we have to give, I suppose, space for the possibility that if pension funds are allowed to wind up in this way, that there be an avalanche of other defined benefit schemes going down the same road, and that the state and your department is going to have to pick up the pieces of that. And I do think, in conclusion, Count Corla, that in some ways what we're dealing with is the fact that the neoliberal model doesn't really work. We've got to put people and public services first, and when we deal with tax cuts and put that up front, we've got to look at the social wage and what people are getting in terms of public services. And in Irish context, we're way behind our European peers in that regard, and they are the issues that needs to be addressed if we are going to deliver the quality of life that I think we would all believe our citizens deserve, from the cradle right through to their retirement years, which, given the ageing population, is a huge area of concern.
Very much, Deputy Daly.